Well, hello, beautiful soul, and welcome to Sacred Beauty and Wellness. This is Dr. Shamika Harris, and today I want to start the first video talking about embracing renewal and rebirth, unleashing the power of the new moon in Cancer. This new moon is very auspicious for many reasons that I will explore in the following videos. This may resonate with you. I know for myself, since the winter solstice in 2022, and I think for other women who I have had an opportunity to speak with, we've been undergoing some major transformations. And what I mean by that is that maybe for the past 6 months, the past year, past 2 years, um, there have been some challenges presented, and you've had to move through those challenges. And as you move through those challenges, you have had to address some shadow aspects of yourself. You've had to recognize that there were some gifts and talents that you've allowed to remain dormant. And now you're embracing all of those aspects of yourself. That's what I mean by transformation. There have been some major changes in your life, and you're a different person. All of those transformations occurred and were necessary because of what tomorrow or what the new moon in Cancer represents. This is a major rebirth for many of us. And especially when I talk more about Punarvasu, you will understand why. So let's talk about what Cancer represents for the soul. Now, you know, when you're on a journey of self discovery, you're going to come across these various different systems or templates that you can use to understand yourself. Astrology might be Myers Briggs, it might be archetypes, it could be the Sephiroth. Those are more esoteric elements, but just these different systems. It could be a personality test. All of it, it's just simply information that allows you to learn more about yourself. And astrology is the same way. Astrology is a system that looks at how our soul is moving through the 12 zodiacal signs, right? So although you may be an Aquarius, you are still a Cancer because there's an aspect of you that has Cancerian energy. When you think about what Cancer represents, you will have a home, there's a family you come from, there are ancestral practices, there's you have beliefs around foundation. All of that falls under the energetic template of Cancer. So our souls are moving through each of these signs. So it started in Aries at the beginning of the year. And in Aries, this is all about identity, your own individual identity, and how you want to come forth. That represents that spark, that fire. This is when we learn the power of energy, represented by the element of fire. When we move into Taurus, Taurus helps us to ground that energy, bring it down back to earth, right? And in Taurus, we learn the importance of resources. We learn about nature. We learn about fertility and making things grow, and sensuality. All of that falls under the element of Taurus in the earth. When we move into Gemini, we move into the realm of thought. This is when your home, well, your church, community, your K through 12 education, all falls under the area of Gemini. Gemini is when we learn the power of cause and effect. Learn, if you're taught this, the law of mentalism and thinking about the power of your thought. When we move into Cancer, this is our first introduction into the element of water and what water represents. And water holds significant meanings as water represents our emotions. But I also think about when I move back here to the sign of Cancer and how, as you can see on the screen, there's a Black woman there. What water represents to me as a Black woman, especially as I took a journey into learning more about African traditional religions and right here, ancestral traditions. Water is so powerful for me, especially having ancestors who were human trafficked, ancestors who died in those waters. Water is also important. The Dogon tribe, I cannot think of the particular country they originate from in Africa, but the Dogon tribe, in their cosmological perspective, they tout that we as humans, we come from the water. And if you consider this, you know, prior to your physical birth, we do spend about 9 to 10 months in the womb, in our mother's womb, what is just our mother's waters, right? So water is it holds memory as well. Think about all the bodies of water. There are so many memories that are there, unspoken memories, unspoken experiences. So I also want to touch on that with the ancestral traditions and that the power of water, because especially for myself, when I think about my own journey and thinking about for African Americans who were stripped of ancestral traditions, right? African Americans who, if we go back to, not only were we human trafficked, we were also stripped of our cultural identity, our cultural practices. We were stripped of our own cosmological ideology. We were stripped of our own relationship with nature and how we interact with God, because during this period when human trafficking occurred, the very aspect of our being was demonized. We were told that everything that we were was evil. We were primitive. So think about how that made our ancestors feel. Think about the feelings around it, and that is important. You know, epigenetics has proven that even with certain mental illnesses, such as depression and anxiety, that can be passed genetically. I cannot think of the particular doctor's name, but I remember watching a video. I know she does a lot of work in the area of slavery and post-traumatic stress, and how the experiences of slavery are still experiences that live very much in our DNA, right? And so something that lives in our DNA as African Americans that we have to consciously consider and then learn how to process and move forward. There is a high level of anti-blackness that lives within us. It's been ingrained, it's been conditioned since our ancestors crossed those waters. And think about how that creates the foundation of our families. Cancer represents foundations, and how the values and beliefs of what we build are built on those foundations. So if we're coming from a group of people who have this deep sense that something within us is evil or wrong, consider how that goes into building a foundation, right? Consider how that falls into ancestral traditions. Consider and how that falls into, or how you would interpret certain aspects of Blackness. And another element of the sign of Cancer is the area of protection, and I neglected to put privacy. Now, under protection and privacy, um, in all of these, I meant to do this. When you go back to the term home and family, because the sign of Cancer, that sign is fully activated for us during our childhood. So, during our childhood, what did we learn about home? When you hear the word home, what feelings emerge for you when you think of home? When you, in your mind, what images are emerging in your mind when you hear the word home? And think about where you are today. How has that changed? Has your ideal of home changed? When you think about family and you think about your childhood, what feelings emerge? How do you feel when you hear the word family? And when you look at yourself at this point in your life today, has that changed? Has your ideas around family changed, right? I think about how when it comes to home and how I just love this space that we're in. I think about people who there's this TikTok couple I follow. I think they were used to be teachers, but they bought an RV and they just travel in their RV with their son. And I know like 30 years ago, someone would have said, "Oh my God, that's ridiculous." But today, the ideal of home is a changing concept, especially for newer generations, and what we conceptualize as a home, even what we conceptualize as family, right? So even when you think back to home and family, think back to your childhood. What did your home smell like? Yeah, let's move into the area of the lover. Let's get sensorial. What did it smell like? What did the furniture feel like? What did you hear in your home? Like if you were to transport yourself, back to your home and during play in different times in your childhood, if someone walked into your house, what would they hear? What would they see? What was on the wall that made that house a home? Um, what did you taste? When I think about taste, I think about my grandmother, Corinne. Like she made, oh my God, the best spaghetti. Like her spaghetti, when she would, the way she prepared her green peppers and the tomatoes, like they were so ripe. It's like I could taste the ripeness in my mouth. Like I can taste it. What did it taste like? Yeah. When you think about your home and family, like what were there if instead of ancestral traditions, we can look at what were some of your family traditions during your childhood. What were some of the television shows you all watched as children? What were some of the movies you watched as a family? When you think about movie characters or television characters, who are the characters that you identify with as, oh, that's a mom, that's what a mother should look like? And then when you think about a father, who were the characters and what qualities they possess that you thought that's what a father is? That's how a father should behave, right? When we move into the area of nurturing examines how the energy that we are giving to something or someone to expand or to further develop their potential. So when you think back to your childhood, how were you nurtured? And nurturing, I want to go beyond providing food, clothes, and shelter. How are you emotionally nurtured? Who nurtured you? Who spent time with you? Who saw your gifts and talents? Who developed those gifts and talents? Who encouraged you? When I think of nurturing, I think about my home church um, and some of the older members. And they're all deceased now, but I just think about three individuals in particular, and especially one, Mr. McKinney. He would always like encourage me. Like he was such a positive masculine figure. Like he had that fire, and I needed that as a child, right? um but how were you nurtured? And then finally, let's move into the area of emotions, feelings, and affection. How we handle emotions presently, all of that stems back to our childhood, right? I remember as a child, I know I learned this when I was in therapy, how I wasn't it was not until my doctoral program that I noticed that I was very detached from my emotions. And I could trace that back to my childhood. Emotions were very dangerous to me. And they were dangerous because I want to preface this and that this next part I'm going to share. This is my parents' personal experience. And I want to note that when this happened, they did not have the tools nor the knowledge that we have presently today to make different decisions, right? And so as a child, when I would see my parents express high levels of emotion to points where it may have become physical, I remember like I would become erratic and I would cry and I would attempt to stop them. And then I realized that I could not control them. So I would go pick up a book. I would go read. Um, Going back to nurturing, I have an aunt, my aunt Denise, continue to rest in strength, Aunt Denise. She nurtured my younger sister and I's love for reading. Like she would give us these trashy novels. That we should not have been reading. But thank you, Titi Nisi. We would read, and I loved how she would come back to us and she would ask us about the plot of the story, the summary, the characters. Like she would go through a whole analysis. My aunt was also a Gemini. Can you see the connection there? So although we weren't her children, she nurtured I can see how she nurtured my intelligence. She nurtured my love for reading. She nurtured my imagination. Now that I think about it, you know? So when you go back into this area and domain of emotions, feelings, and affection, as I stated that for me, the way that I would handle emotions from others is that I would disassociate. I would go and read. Now, to some degree, that was a positive coping mechanism in that I was allowing myself to develop a skill. But it was somewhat detrimental for me in that I wasn't honoring what I was feeling. I wasn't honoring that, okay, in this moment, I feel afraid. I'm scared. I don't feel safe, right? So I can see how, as I became an adult and later on in my life, as I'm moving through my own self exploration, how certain emotions, like I had a hard time identifying and naming those emotions because I did not identify. I wasn't taught how to do that as a child, right? Or think about it this way: when you have expressed emotion, if you walked in and you were sad or you looked frustrated, who noticed your emotional makeup? Who noticed when you felt different or you were experiencing different emotions or different moods? Um, was it acknowledged? Was it explored? Did they reflected, oh, you're sad because of this reason? And was it affirmed? Oh, I can understand why you feel this way. This is how we're going to move forward. So if you didn't have those three elements, right? If no one ever acknowledged your emotions and they did not explore the emotion, and they did not affirm that you feel how you feel, can you see how that might cause a problem later on in life? Because think about it. That means I know for myself, as again, my aunt being honest here, I can see how these different times in my life I lacked emotional regulation. And I lacked emotional regulation because I was disconnected from my emotions, because I was like, no, emotions are dangerous. So I had to move through that. And I had to start to learn how to view that differently. And a lot of that happened as I reconnected to the feminine. So coming back here, emotions, feelings, and going back to affection. Who showed you affection when you were a child? How were you shown affection? And then I don't, if you may find this triggering, so I'm giving you a trigger warning. Were there times where you experienced inappropriate affection? And how did you, as a child, how was that acknowledged? How was that addressed, right? I'm going to talk about this maybe a little bit more in the next video. I am a survivor of childhood sexual trauma. And one of the topics and areas that I had to address with my mom, this was much later in my life. I did not tell her during when I was a teenager. This is much later in my life. And I had to address with her a hidden resentment that I had towards her, was that when that sexual trauma was occurring, I was like, I felt like you didn't even notice me. Like before this trauma occurred, I was a very, I will say, vivacious young woman. I just had a lot of energy. I was very, very talkative, very forthright. And then when that experience happened, like I just shut down. I shut down. I stayed in my room. I disconnected from my siblings. Like I would read, or I just became very, I just moved inward, even in my clothing. Like I would make sure my entire body was covered. And like I had to, have an honest conversation with my mom and dad. Like when all that happened, like you didn't notice that I was different. You didn't notice that I had changed, right? And this is not, because two things can be correct at the same time. My mom struggled with depression. So if you are depressed, you're not seeing clearly, right? Then are you going to be able to see others clearly? Because some way, in some fashion, you are in your own hole of depression. So, and that does not mean negating her or removing her from responsibility. It's just giving context to what that looks like when that's in a home. So, in the next video, we'll talk about the sign of Cancer and how this connects to the feminine energy of the lover and the power of this new moon and what it is activating for the divine feminine. All right, we'll talk soon.